On the freezing morning of December 6, 1917, the harbor in Halifax, Nova Scotia, was already awake and choked with traffic. Entering the fourth year of the First World War, this deep, ice-free port served as the British Empire's primary North American gateway. Hundreds of thousands of troops and millions of tons of supplies funneled through this stretch of water toward the battlefields of Europe. Among the vessels moving that morning was the SS Mont-Blanc, a 320-foot that had arrived from New York to join a transatlantic military convoy. To protect against U-boats, the military sealed the harbor with anti-submarine nets every night. At daybreak, a massive backlog of ships rushed to navigate the narrow channels at once. This intense wartime congestion meant commercial ferries, tugboats, and massive military transports fought for the same shipping lanes. In this environment, the demand for logistical speed and secrecy often superseded fundamental maritime safety. The Mont-Blanc functioned as a secretly overloaded munition ship masquerading as a standard transport freighter. Inside, the lower holds were packed with 2,300 tons of picric acid, 200 tons of TNT, and 10 tons of gun cotton. Above that powder keg, the weather deck was stacked with hundreds of barrels of high-octane benzol fuel. Standard international maritime protocol dictated that any ship carrying this volume of munitions had to fly a red warning flag, signaling to every other vessel in the area to give them a wide berth. However, the risks posed by German submarines led to a relaxation of these rules. Military authorities ordered the Mont-Blanc to fly no warning flags to avoid making the ship a priority target for U-boats. This administrative decision forced a massive floating bomb into a crowded, busy harbor without a single visible warning of the cargo it carried. As the Mont-Blanc headed inbound, the SS Imo, a Norwegian relief ship, was heading outbound. Empty of cargo and riding high in the water, the Imo was traveling over the harbor's speed limit, and dodging earlier traffic had pushed it into the wrong shipping lane. This map shows the layout of the Narrows, the tightest bottleneck in the harbor. The Mont-Blanc moved slowly up the correct right-hand side, while the Imo sped directly toward it in the exact same lane. The pilot of the Mont-Blanc blew a single whistle blast to assert his right-of-way. The Imo responded with 2 blasts, a refusal to yield the lane. The Mont-Blanc whistled again. The Imo refused again. With the distance closing rapidly, both captains initiated panic maneuvers. The Mont-Blanc turned hard left to avoid grounding on the rocks, while the Imo threw its engines into full reverse. Because the Imo was empty, its propeller was partially exposed. Reversing it created a violent transverse thrust that swung the steel bow of the Norwegian ship sharply to the right, directly into the path of the turning Mont-Blanc. A low-speed traffic dispute, escalated by stubborn decisions and flawed communication, had now become an unavoidable collision course. At 8:45 a.m., the two ships collided. The physical impact was a deceptive 9-foot scratch into the starboard side of the French freighter. That gash crushed several wooden barrels on deck. Liquid benzol spilled down the hull, and as the steel plates scraped against one another, the friction generated a shower of sparks that ignited the fuel. Flames surged across the deck, spreading uncontrollably. The crew of the Mont-Blanc, knowing the fire would soon detonate the explosive cargo in the holds below, immediately abandoned the vessel. As the sailors rowed their lifeboats toward the opposite shore, they shouted desperate warnings back toward the city. However, the English-speaking bystanders on the docks could not understand the French crew's cries. The blazing, abandoned ship drifted aimlessly toward the thousands of residents and factory workers near Pier 6, moving the site of the disaster from open water to the heart of the city's north end. Pinned against the pier, the fire superheated the drums of benzol fuel. The barrels began launching into the morning sky like massive fireworks, trailing thick black smoke high above the harbor. This visual spectacle drew thousands of unaware citizens to the waterfront. Thousands more gathered at their windows in schools, homes, and workplaces to watch the burning ship. For nearly 20 minutes, the ship burned at the foot of the city. Then, at exactly 9:04 a.m., the heat reached the dry explosives. The human curiosity drawing spectators to windows turned the glass into a primary cause of injury. When the blast hit, shattering windows blinded or maimed hundreds who were watching the fire. The blast physics were catastrophic. A 5,000-degree fireball vaporized the water, and a supersonic shockwave instantly leveled every structure within a half-mile radius. Displaced harbor water rushed back into the void, forming an 18-meter tsunami. The surge drowned survivors and picked up the massive SS Emo, washing it completely out of the water and grounding it on the Dartmouth shore. In an instant, nearly 2,000 people were killed and 9,000 more were injured. The entire Richmond district was reduced to flattened timber. The following day, a blizzard buried the ruins in 16 inches of snow, paralyzing rescue efforts in a city without infrastructure. The Halifax Explosion remains a stark record of how wartime logistical haste and administrative gaps can level a city as effectively as a targeted military strike.